Thank you for joining, everybody. This is our last session of the day, and it's going to be presented by Anil Mahadev. He's with WhereScape, and he'll be talking about delivering data warehouses on Microsoft SQL Server. So take it away.
Awesome. Thanks. Oh,
okay. Yeah. And just please, everyone, stay on mute during the presentation and post your questions in the chat, and we'll be watching there. All right, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Laurie. And welcome, everyone, for the SQL Saturday. I'm Anil Mahadev, a Senior Cloud Solutions Architect at WhereScape, and super excited for doing this session. I would like to thank the SQL Saturday team for having me on this session. And I know that this is going to be the last session, so I'll try to keep it as interesting as possible and interactive. So we look forward to showcasing some on how you're going to learn about delivering data warehouses on Microsoft SQL Server using WhereScape, and also just a general overview on what the typical landscape is. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Are you folks able to see my screen? Can you please confirm?
I see it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Laurie. So what we'll do now is, let me just go ahead and give you a quick slide deck on what we are about to showcase. So the agenda for today will be the following. We will be talking about the data warehouse landscape. We'll be talking about what exactly entails in typical data warehouse lifecycle. We will be covering how to look at data warehousing from a WhereScape standpoint, and we'll talk a little bit about the architecture. And lastly, we'll go ahead and choose. We'll be doing a demo.
You can join us from anywhere. You can choose just a day, and through Meetup you can see which sessions we have.
So we have a demo of a simple, building a simple dimension, and then finally we will be having some time for Q&A. We'll also please use the chat window to type in your questions, or you can send an email to us, which I'll have at the end of the slide. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the typical modern data warehouse, as you can see from this screen, this is from Microsoft. They have a lot of interesting pieces to the puzzle, right? So if you're coming from a traditional, structured-based infrastructure such as business or custom apps, or whether you're dealing with log files or media, any kind of unstructured data, here we're showcasing an Azure Synapse Analytics pipeline that would be taken into an Azure data lake storage. And you could do that by either going and modeling it within the Synapse Analytics, Synapse SQL environment, and using Azure Analysis Services. Then you will go and prepare using the Synapse Analytics pack using Apache Spark. And finally, once it's served onto your Azure Analysis Services, you will then bring it down to a Power BI or a favorite tool of your choice. So that's the typical modern data warehouse needs scenario that we're seeing today. Now let's talk about the data warehouse lifecycle. The data warehouse lifecycle, typically here you can see the objects in gray, the arrows pointing. We typically start with a design phase and then iterate it through a deployment, operational phase, and finally enhance phase, or rebuilding or re-architecting there. Now where WhereScape comes into be is at the iteration level itself. We have a lot of rapid design and agile prototyping approach to our solution, and that's where we help a lot of our customers gain the input of that. The other the second phase is where we would have one or several deployment phases. Like, for example, you're checking in your code and you want to make sure that this design is acceptable. So you'll go through multiple iterations first and do a rapid design. And next, you'll go into several deployment phases to the dev, test, production, and to continuously improve as part of that CI/CD pipeline that you want to go ahead and implement as part of your data warehouse strategy. Now, each organization is unique, so we do not profess a one-size-fits-all kind of an approach or a one-solution-fits-all approach. We help you to make those rapid changes through iterative changes to the solution due to operational requirements. So let's say that team A within your organization has got a purpose of leveraging a particular dimension or a fact table. You can actually go and have that operationalized based on the needs of the business with ease. Next, we have the enhancement phase, where we would actually go ahead and make changes to the solution due to the rapid changes in the business requirements. So that's something that is very important as you're dealing with these areas. So now let's talk about the WhereScape architecture. Now this is where it gets really interesting, where we're not trying to profess like I mentioned, a one-size-fits-all, but I would like to go over what the architecture is from a bigger landscape and how it can help folks like you who are on today to seek more information of how you can better fit your data warehousing development needs. One is here at the top, we have our data sources. So from our data sources, you will see that we can acquire any source. So that could be a source system such as an RDBMS, a flat file, etc. From once you've acquired that source, you will then put it into the loading process, and that will generate some load tables. Then we will go into our data transformation layer that would actually build those staging tables and staging views. Next, we will decide on whether we want a data foundation layer. And this is not to be in strictest form, but these are the options available, and you can customize it to your needs. So here we can choose a data store or a data lake. And here we can choose a data vault design. And lastly, we can choose a dimension, a third normal form. Next, once we've established that, we can then go in and perform some business transformation rules. So here we can actually go ahead and add some business logic to the objects in question, and then move on to our end user layer that would produce either a star schema or a business vault, depending upon the choices that you have chosen in the data foundation layer. And then we can go in and access this in the form of views, aggregates, exports. And finally, you can access this with your favorite analytics tools, as we had seen in the modern data warehouse slide. Now, what powers all of this is the metadata repository that holds all of this information at each step of the way of the life cycle. You can have that stored in our metadata repository. Then one of the key things to any data warehousing project is documentation. We all know, with so many of us being so busy that we are, that sometimes it becomes a challenge to build documentation at every step of the way. We help you to get there faster and much more efficient and less error prone to the entire exercise. Of course, where would all of this be without any kind of automation, right? So scheduling of all these jobs is vital. So as you're working with traditional data warehouses where you would automate and schedule some of the scripts and everything, we help you to get that in there. Now, one of the key challenges to most organizations that are facing today is the ability to look at external data sources, external objects and models. how can we bring something that you folks have built over the years, and we can help you to retrofit them within this entire architecture scheme. So with that, I would like now to switch gears and take you straight to the product demonstration. Again, here the same thing we have. Within here, we have our WhereScape RED user interface, where we'll be talking a little bit about how you can go ahead and build your next data warehouse with these. So here I have a couple of connections to my data warehouse, and here you can see I have my schemas, my dev, test, load, staging, and EDW. So with all of these, we have that. So and then we have our source browser, where we can actually go ahead and bring in all of the data sources from the source system. So for example, here I'll go ahead and I'll pick, let's say, products. I'll just go ahead and bring the region table here. And here you will see that as I dragged and dropped it, it brought me this pop-up where I can actually go ahead and give it the name. And also I can start building my documentations from the get-go. So for example, I can just say the regions table here that we're trying to go ahead and do. And then what we have is you can also go ahead and look at some of the sources where you can actually see if you do not want to bring all the data, you can always put in a where clause here in the group by and customize what information you want to bring in. And again, on the documentation side for the notes, you can go ahead and add, this is the region table. Okay, then we'll go ahead and load it. And here we have 4 rows loaded. At this point, we're disconnected from our source. So basically all of this has now gone into our metadata system. So I'm going to go ahead and look at and say display data. And here we have the information. And it goes and adds a DSS region record source and load date, which is very important. So it goes and brings it from there. Next, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about how to bring in the staging. So now all I have to do is go back to my data warehouse and reload it. And now if I go to my load section, you'll see that I have region. So here I'll go ahead and add the region here. And what we have here now that we have the stage regions, we can go ahead and display the data. We have that, all that is good. The next step is to actually go ahead and build our dimension. And again, I'm going to be using our staging data, and then I'll drag and drop our region into the data warehouse. You'll notice that WhereScape is pretty smart enough to actually go ahead and build all of these things, and we can just set them to our default region. And you will see that all of these regions here are taken into the from SQL Server Management Studio. I've gone ahead and created all of these schemas that will reflect this within the solution. So here I'll go ahead and add it to my dimension. So here we have a couple of options that we support in terms of what a typical data warehousing project would be. So for example, we could choose either a normal dimension, slowly changing dimension. I mean, how many of you have actually seen how much of a pain this has been to actually go ahead and implement slowly changing dimensions? And we do that with ease. And obviously we have the previously data retained area, and then finally we have the date range. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a normal one. I'm just going to go ahead and build this. I'm going to choose my business key columns, which is very important. So here I'll choose my region ID as my region, and I'll go ahead and hit OK. Now that I've gone ahead and established this, let us take a step back and better understand what went on behind the scenes, right? So for example, if I were to go ahead and explore the properties of this particular dimension, I can actually go ahead and click on edit. And this is where you can see we produce first-class SQL here in terms of how we can go ahead and work with this. So here you can see all of my procedures and updates. Everything is being generated here as part of it. So here you can see once it's inserted, if there's any change, there's the update, all that good stuff. So now let's talk a little bit about, let's say I want to go into my customers dimension. Then let me go ahead and display the data. So here you can see I'm having some information here in both the staging as well as in the customers area. So what I will do is I'll display the data. You'll notice that we do not have region any of the values here. So what that does is I'm actually going to go ahead and pre-fill this. The business user has come back to me and said, Anil, I need this information to be filled with something, not just leave them blank for compliance purposes. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll first of all go in here, and then I'll set the context to the region, and I'll go to the properties of it. I will then go into the transformation area. And here you can see I have a string function. Now, here we can see we have a bunch of functions that are catering to these various database platforms. So it's for SQL Server, we actually have all of these built-in functions that we can implement. So my use case right now is if there's a null value for a column that is of type region, I would like to have a default value inserted. So I'll go ahead in there, and now I'll just choose, I'll just call it as not applicable, for example. And then I'll go ahead and regenerate. Then I'll update. So now here, if I want to go ahead and say display data, you'll see that it's updated here. Now, in my dimension, since I brought it from the stage area, I just have to go ahead and update it here. And now I have my 60 records in place. See that? And then I can also go ahead and look at it from, if it was a slowly changing dimension, I would actually go ahead and look at the 0 count record here at the top and also see of what's changed. Now, if I go back in here and go back to the properties and go into the code again, you will notice that it has gone ahead and added anywhere that's not applicable. It'll go ahead and update all of those records. Now, while I'm here, I wanted to quickly showcase an example of, as a data warehouse professional, version control becomes vital, especially in a large team-based environment, right? So what we help you to do is to manage that change with ease. So here, for example, I'm just adding small comment by Anil, and I'm just going to go ahead and save this. Now what I'll do is, if I wanted to go in here and add something else, I'll just say something else. I'll just comment this out. If I were to go to my tools area and say view procedure or template, you will see that it auto-versioned the SQL Saturday option here. And you can see that here, if I wanted to see, if I want to compare now, compared to viewer, you'll see that the small comment by Anil, and if there's anything else, it'll actually go ahead and show you that it's added all of this information here. So with this arrow pointing here. Now let's take a look at our actual dimension here. So here, for example, I actually would bring in, so what I've done is I've actually taken the orders and order details, and what I've done is I've dragged and dropped a couple of dimensions that I've built. So for example, here, if I look at the so the fact table that I have, so if I scroll down here, you'll see that I have some keys that I've dragged and dropped from the various dimensions. So from the dim orders, dim customers, dim order date, and I'm using all of these here. And if I look at the properties of this, you will see that these are all what entails for that particular dimension, right? And so far you've seen me not type in anything apart from a couple of documentation related information. So that's how easy it is that so far you're not even touching your keyboard for getting most of the stuff done. And that's how we enforce our developer productivity for this solution. Now that I've gone ahead and looked at this, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my diagram section. And here, what I'll do is under the diagram, I'll go ahead and just say new diagram. And here I can pick my fact table. And I can choose my fact table here. And we have a variety of ways of how you can go ahead and build. So here, for example, I've given a schema one. And then if I wanted to go ahead and do a source diagram, you will see that from these two, from the same database, I'm taking from the order details, going to the load orders. This is going into the stage order details. And these are the sources. And finally, these are what it took for getting the fact table being built. One of the other areas of this is our impact diagram. So this is where you would see where if there's any kind of an impact and it's only going to be impacted by this, you get that. But the key thing in terms of leveraging this is our schema diagram, where you can get our star schema being built here in a very easy way. Now that we've learned a little bit about this, what I would like to do now is I would like to go into my dimension, and I'll go into my customer dimension, and I'll go ahead and go to impact, and I'll do a trackback diagram. And from here, the next level would be to actually go ahead and create a job. So from here, I can actually go ahead and create a job, and this is where it would generate the job details. And from there, what you can do is you can either go and specify the frequency and then see what it entails. Also gives you the time, whether the scheduler. And from here, you can see that we have all of our objects that are required for the job. So we have a load table, we have a staging, and then we have a dimension. So I'll choose OK on that. If I click on all jobs, now you can see as part of the view tasks what the process will be to run this. Now let's step back and talk a little bit about the dynamic agile process, like how you would be in a very agile centric form of development of your data warehouse. This is where you can actually go ahead and start exporting the project to dev stage production. So what we can do is here, for example, this is our project, and what I can do now is I can actually go ahead and say into my let me go into my diagram. So let me go into the diagram here and go to my tools, and I can say create application. So this is where the directory will be residing. So if I were to go in here, and if I go into WhereScape, here you can see that I have a bunch of application templates known as WSTs, where we're having these application templates being ready for deployment. So what we'll do now is I'll give it just an application identifier. So I'll give us a SQL Sat. So here I'll just call it as SQL Saturday here. And once I'm done that, I'll actually go ahead and put it in a different folder so that we know it's for SQL Saturday. And I'll call this as dev for this for now. So it will be my deployment for my dev application. Next, I'll go ahead and choose objects to add or remove. So here we can actually go ahead and add any of the other objects that we would like as part of this application. And if you would not like any object specifically, you can see we have all of these here. So now you can see that we generate a set of WSTs. So now that I've got that, I can then go ahead and launch our setup administrator. And that will bring us into the application tab. And this is where I can go ahead and change the application directly. And here you can see if I paste and I go under SQL Saturday Dev, I select this folder, you'll see that I have my dim customer here being ready. So all I have to do is just go ahead and choose install application. pick a repository where I would like that to be there and go ahead and set it up. So now that we have built our application and it's ready for development, our documentation team comes back to us and says, Anil, all this is great, but you have just given us a bunch of files. Where's the documentation? So we do a fantastic job of generating all of this documentation for your needs. So one of the best practices that we recommend is wherever your application deployment is, just go ahead and create a directory called documentation, so that when you deploy this and send this as a zip file or put it in the network, you can go ahead and have this with ease. So here I'll just go ahead as SQL Saturday demo doc. And all of this should be just as the default. And now we're going ahead and generating this here as well. Now that you've generated this, we can go back and take a look at it in our web browser. And you can customize this to your needs based on CSS. And here, what we do is I'm going through the business documentation first. So for example, here I have some date dimensions, some customer dimensions, employee dimensions, etc. Right? And all this is good for the business. Then the technical audiences would come back and say, okay, so where's the technical documentation? So here is the technical documentation where the users can actually go in and view the dimensions. So here, for example, if I'm looking at the customer dimension, I can go into the source diagram here, and it provides me that. Next, let me take a look at some of my load tables. Go to my load customers. And then here, I can actually go into my source diagram here. And I can look at also some of my impact tables and impact stored procedures. So if I go in here, you'll see that we build a first-class coding repository for you so that you can have this for your reference as to who's done the change, has been done by what, any kind of notes, all that good stuff. Now that we've spoken a little bit on building this, let me take you through a quick process of showcasing one of the other cool capabilities about this in terms of going with, as I've done the business requirement for this, what I'll do is I'll probably show you how you can go ahead and look at some of the procedures. So for example, if I look at some of these procedures, these are all the dim update and dim customers. So you could probably just view the procedure without having to make any changes. Now this is grayed out so that you don't accidentally, as I'm typing here, as you can hear the sound, I'm not able to make any changes visually. So unless I have the appropriate permissions, I can actually go ahead and edit this. And here you can see it's currently locked for edit. So now once I have releases, so it noticed that Anil already has this open, somebody else has this open. Why don't you go ahead and close that and then relaunch it? So that gives you the ability to work with this with ease. Now, last but not least is I wanted to also discuss, just before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk to you about our upcoming test drive. So we're hosting a test drive, and we'll give you an email at the end of this session to register for it. It's going to be on June 24th. So stay tuned for that. And then we will send an email to the email address that I'll be sharing here shortly to register an interest. And please, in the subject line, say referred by SQL Saturday in the subject line for test drive. Register an interest for the test drive. So our team will take a look at it and go ahead and approve the request as a need required. And then we look forward to showcasing a much more in-depth look at our solution. But for now, I would like to go back to the slides, and here's the questions. And what I'll do is, for the convenience of everybody, I'll go ahead and copy this, and I'll go back to the section here, and I'll put in the chat window, and I'll go ahead and paste it. So please go ahead and share this in the subject line, and you can also request a personalized demonstration from any of our solutions architects. So feel free to send an email with your questions to marketing@wherescape.com. And also, if you want to request the test drive, it's based in the US from Central and Pacific time zones. So please let us know when you would like to attend, and then we can, our marketing team will get back to you on the confirmations. And with that, I would like to thank SQL Saturday for an amazing, invitation to help us present, and we look forward to the next one. And I thank you all for your time. Over to you, Laurie.
Yeah, thank you, Anil. We really appreciate you speaking today, and we definitely appreciate WhereScape sponsoring our event. So
awesome.
Can't do this without our sponsors, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody have questions? I don't see any in the chat.
And if you all do have any questions, please send an email to marketing@wherescape.com, and in the subject line, please mention SQL Saturday. And also, if you want to request to be part of the test drive this month, please go ahead and send an email to marketing@wherescape.com again. And also in the subject line, please say interested in test drive, in WhereScape test drive, and we can, our marketing team will get back to you on the confirmations.
Very good.
Awesome. Excellent. Anything else, Laurie?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, I would like to thank everyone again, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening or wherever you are from across the globe. And thank you very much for attending SQL Saturday again. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil.
Have a good one.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one more